So we're going to continue on from yesterday's share, where we discussed, we connected the progression of economic thought, and we connected it to spiritual thought. And we connected the idea of the Industrial Revolution to we started with the agriculture age, to the Industrial Revolution, to the computer age, to now where we're at, which is the conceptual age. And we basically showed how through this series of progression of historical thought as it relates to output, because when we're talking about, okay. So basically, we showed this progression of thought, of experiences, of how the economy has went from this place of people working in farms and the thinking process behind that, and eventually working with machines and factories, and eventually corporations and computers. And we showed how the political system during the time of the agriculture age was very much controlled and influenced by religious thought, in the case of the United States, Christian thought. And we showed how that idea of priest and reverends and bishops and all these different ideas really influenced the political makeup, and then how it progressed into the Industrial Revolution, which was this time of nation states and patriotism, and then all the way to the corporations, which was a time where the businesses very much influenced policies and these things, and how these ideas connect us to this new era and this new time where there's so many things that are involved that allow us to express ourselves in a way that we've never been able to express before. Because when we look at most of the problems in the world, when we think about war, you think about famine, you think about things like pollution, you think about inequities, most of these systems were based off of the social thought that exists at this time. But today I want to talk about something specific, which is individuality and the power of individuality. And why is individuality, what is the challenge with the concept of individuality? And versus where we're at now versus where we're at before. So when you think about the agriculture age, the agriculture age was a time where people worked on farms, they lived in a communal setting, they relied on each other for resources, and traditionally they congregated through churches, these types of ideas. But the issue comes when the challenge of individuality really comes during the time of the Industrial Revolution and factories, because factories and machinery created this dynamic of a supply line. And the supply line was a collective group of people working and playing different roles. And this ideology created this idea of a communal understanding of self, meaning that when the school system that was designed, the school system created a thinker, that the thinker itself had to see himself a part of a collective, meaning that if you look at the school structure is a group of students sitting in the classroom and a teacher giving them information about what they need to learn, right? And the information that they need to learn is based off of other people's ideas, right? So not only are your intelligence is now part of this collective, but the information that's given to you is not has really no basis of you as an individual. The information that's given to you is other people's thoughts, and you're graded based off of your understanding of other people's thoughts, right? That's the school system. So that system that existed in the 19th century progressed all the way into the 20th century, which we had the age of the corporation. So when you look at how the mind of the individual was created during the 19th and 20th century, we're talking about a mind that was developed to be able to take on tasks and to be able to organize these tasks and to be able to fulfill these tasks, to the point that being an individual and having your own opinion and having your own thoughts or your own perception of life, you are demonized in society. you're called arrogant, you're called self-absorbed, you're called a separatist, you're called, in school, they call you a bad citizen. And this is the thinking process of the individual. And it's not just here, even around the world, because much of even in the Jewish school structure is even influenced by a lot of these thoughts as well too. So now we're in an era where now the human being, as we discussed in the conceptual era, has just as much influence on many levels as corporations that have many employees, just as strong as a nation state, as we see with the age of the Industrial Revolution, and has just as much power as the church or religious organization. People, individuals can make humongous changes in a way that never existed before. They could write ideas, they could create virtual communities. They can inspire, thoughts that become viral. Because when you think about viral is no different than the concept spiritually of being an av, right? Because there's one idea which is a viral idea, which is, okay, I have a video and that video gets shared. Okay, that's one idea. But what we see in social media is one video, one dance, one concept, a way of thinking, inspiring many other forms of thinking, many forms of the same idea expressed in many different ways. So I can have an idea about life or spirituality or the way I should live. In that idea, I could express that in a video, 3-minute video, 4-minute video. And people are like, wow, I love this idea. So they share it with a friend, they share it with a friend, they share it with a friend. And that's been one of the biggest struggles with traditional programming versus the internet world, because traditional programming was more about having great visual experiences, as where content now on the internet is about creating content that people resonate with and want to share with a friend. And that's not always the best visual experience. So when we talk about the idea of being an av, right, we talk about this idea of having a father who has a particular idea, like Abraham Avinu. Abraham Avinu was the expression of a new system of being able to complete God's challenges, right? There's an interesting midrashim that talks about Noah. And Noah, after the Mabul, one of the first things that Noah did was plant a vineyard, right? And so the midrashim says, as he's planting the vineyard, the Satan is next to him. And the Satan is whispering to him and saying these different things, whatever. And so he was building, to this point, he was building his vineyard, and he eventually they said he wanted to make Kiddush, because they said that the world was so pure, there was no sins in the world after the Mabul, that he felt if he just made a bracha over Hagefen, that it could maybe have brought the full geula for all of humanity, because the world was completely pure. But right then, the Satan was with him. And so eventually Noah had so much wine that he became drunk and different things happened, right? So I thought to myself, like, the thing about that midrashim, it shows a very specific thing about Noah. Noah, as great as he was, as much as he saved pretty much all of humanity in his own way, he wasn't able to complete the task or the challenges as individuals. Because if he was able to, he would have never fell into that. So Abraham came into the world, and we know Abraham was given 10 tests, and he was able to complete these 10 tests. And feel free to jump in at any point. He was able to complete these 10 tests. So this concept of being able to complete the purpose of our life, and not just being great, not just being greater than people around us, but being able to complete my test as an individual, was this new concept. So through Abraham, you have Yitzhak and even Ishmael. You have from Yitzhak, you have Esav, and you have Yaakov, and from Yaakov you have the Bnei Israel, and from Bnei Israel we have this reality that we see today, which a group of people, community of people, still trying to get to this place of Abraham, which is completing their total purpose. So this idea of Abraham is the perfect expression of a being enough, right? Because you have this idea where I have a viral video, or I have, a blog, or I have, maybe even some musical thing that I create through my laptop, and I'm able to share that on the internet, and that idea goes to the next guy, which in this case could be Yitzhak and Ishmael, people, two different nations. And then that transfers over through Yitzhak to Esav and Yaakov. And Esav does what he does, Ishmael does what he does. And then you have the story continues with these 12 sons that come from Yaakov. And these 12 sons have this experience, and eventually they go into this place of darkness, and they come out of it and they form a nation, right? And this nation now perpetuates this new idea for all of humanity. So when we think about technology and we think about this idea of sharing ideas through social media and building new ideas and building new concepts, and how these concepts can now become, when we say viral, we can look at it spiritually and say, no, this is a big enough. This idea, this prat comes from this call, and this call now created this prat. We can see that. This is how things are being exchanged. So the point is saying that now we're in a reality where people are in this place of, they have this tremendous desire to express themselves, and they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to be a sole individual. So most of the expressions of, gender questioning or, liberalism or equality or any of these things are all connected to the collective, because we are still holding by the psychology of the 19th and 20th century, which says, if you break out of the mold, the system breaks down. The system breaks down. The system of corporations, the system of community, the system of reliance, the system of workforce, the system of supply line. Everything breaks down when people become individuals. But now, one of the best examples express this, because this is all very spiritual ideas. When we talk about the new human being that has this ability to rectify and express their uniqueness in a way that's never been done before, even before maybe even David and Melech, I'm talking about during the time of Abraham, because Abraham didn't have any necessarily borders that he had to work off of. B'nai Israel does. The Tanaim do, the Amraim do, right? So the idea is to say, hey, you know what? How do we move forward? How are we able to say, I am an individual, I have something unique to express into this world. I have something that no one else in the world would ever be able to bring in the world but me. So how do I build myself to get to that point? And how do I help people to do it as well? But how do I do it in a way that doesn't compromise my neighbor, to take away from somebody else's freedom? And that's what Rabbi Hirsch was teaching us when he talked about Shabbat, an earlier shiur. Rabbi Hirsch asked a question. He says, well, if all of nature is subordinate to Hashem, what is it that protects nature from man? From man thinking he's a master, that man thinks he could do whatever he wants. Because all of these different things, as we learned in Rabbi Pinchas's shiur, all of these different levels have to do with tikkunim, because the rocks have a spark of God in them. The plants have a spark of God in them. The animals have a spark of God in them. And humans obviously have the biggest spark of God, and so do our neighbors. So how do we understand that everybody has a process of tikkun? Everything in this world has a process of tikkun. Everything is supposed to elevate to its next level. For humans, it's about being totally connected to Hashem. For animals, it's about becoming humans. For plants, it's about becoming animals. For minerals, it's about becoming plants. So how do we create a safe space, as many of our liberal buddies and brothers and sisters say, how do we create a safe space for this to manifest? And so Rabbi Hirsch says, Shabbat. Shabbat, and keeping Shabbat keeps us in the frame of thinking to understand that God is the master of the world. God tells us how to deal with the world, to the point God says on the seventh day of creation, don't work. Don't do any of the labor, no, any of the physicalities. There's 39 malakot. You do not do these things on Shabbat that you do during the week. So don't do those things. Well, because of what? Because God wants to show us that it's his invisible, to use Rabbi Hirsch's words in English, because he wrote it in German, it's the invisible word, it's the invisible influence that God has over the world that we need to be reminded of. Because if we don't have that reminder, we'll be in a place of thinking that we're the masters of the world and we could do whatever we want, and thus preventing our fellow man and all of nature from achieving its total purpose. And so that frame of reference is there to be a catalyst, not just for the Jew, but for all of humanity to have a basis to start this understanding of self-evaluation, self-recognizing, being able to actualize myself in a healthy way. And so as we learned before, that not only did Hashem give us Shabbat, he also gave us 316 ways to create fences and connections to Hashem, but fences around our negative attributes that we were also created with. Selfishness, ego, vanity, confusion, the idea of separation. So he gave us 613 ways to make sure that we are able to stay in the game. But to break it down even more specific, he said, Mishpatim, that's how we deal with our fellow man. Hukim, this is how we deal with nature. Things are subordinate to us. And mitzvot allows us to elevate ourselves to connect directly to God. So if we look at it from a religious standpoint, okay, he's religious, she's religious, I wear this thing, we do this, we do these different things, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a world, creating a world where the world can achieve its tikkunim together. That all humanity, every man, every woman could achieve this tikkunim. All the animals could achieve their tikkunim. All the plants could achieve their tikkunim. All the minerals, the rocks that you walk by, you don't even think about, right? You know, they talk about the rocks, the stones of Yerushalayim being so holy. Why? Because there's a certain merit being a rock in Yerushalayim versus in Los Angeles, California.
The souls that went into the rocks in Yerushalayim are on a much higher level.
Exactly. In the same way we learn how fish. Right? Why are fish so geschmack? Why we say like, oh, the tzaddikim, we eat tzaddikim on Shabbat, fish, because they said the souls inside of the fish are almost like the highest level of the animal kingdom of neshama. And so that's why they did the most rectification. They did the most correction. So that's why we consider them tzaddikim. So the mindset that we should have, if we really read our text the right way and we remove religiosity and we get into the spiritual system of living, that Hashem wanted to create a safe space for all of humanity so they could do the job that they want. So now we're in this era of the individual. Now we're in the age of the individual can separate themselves and become more selfish and more gaivadik than ever before in human history and bring more destruction to their neighbor. Or we're in a generation where this individuality could be a chance for me to, one, recognize the power that I have as an individual, the sanctity that I have as an individual, the rookiness that I have as an individual. And now I have all these tools that are going to allow me to export my uniqueness and my gifts all across planet Earth. You guys want to say anything? So that's where we're at now. So when we think about the idea of free market capitalism, for sure, it's been a good source, but also somewhat of a destructive source, because free market capitalism doesn't have a consciousness. It could prey, like when you think about the criminal justice system in America and the inequalities that exist into it, is because of capitalism. It's because prisons is a business, jail is a business, law enforcement is a business. So for them to grow, you have to create criminals. That's capitalism. That's why people speak against it. In order to have real estate, the real estate value, you have to have poor neighborhoods in order to have middle-class neighborhoods and have rich neighborhoods. So these are the downsides of capitalism, right? These are the downsides, yeah? And so where we're at today is saying like, we're in a new era today that now, coming off the era of the corporations in the 20th century, now we're in a place where the individual human being is now in that position of output, of creation, of influence. Before, it was only the collective. It was the corporation. Before the corporation, it was the factory. the supply line. And before the supply line, it was farms, agriculture. But now it's the individual. There's a famous idea when they talk about converts, and they say, you know what? The Midrashim says there was a time where Hashem went to all the nations in the world, and he said, hey, you know what? Do you guys want to keep the Torah? And all the nations refused except for this nation called Bnei Israel. And they received the Torah, and the rest is history. But the Midrashim also says that there were people inside of each of those nations that were part of the collective that also wanted to keep the Torah, but they were minorities. And so therefore they didn't have that experience. And so their souls came back into this world and became what we call Jews, right? Today. Now that's the same idea with the corporations, with the factories, and even the farm agriculture setting. There were people who saw that there were things that their companies were doing that weren't right. There was people who saw that the way of how the supply lines and what was being manufactured wasn't necessarily the best thing for nature. And there was people who saw that things like slavery and these different things that existed during the agriculture age wasn't right. But they were the minority, because capitalism in a free market economy was the dominating engine, because it was never about people, it was about this overarching structure, which was the corporation, which was the factory, which was the business, which was trade, which were these different things. So if it made money, it doesn't matter how many people are hurt. If we go to war, if we could create a war and we could sell tons of arms and tons of uniforms and tons of radar devices, let's sell it. Let's do business. Let's make money. Who cares how many people suffer? How many people, go down from this? It doesn't matter. We have to make money. It's about profit, right? And so now we have this thing called the military-industrial complex. Most of that is what you're seeing now in Russia and Ukraine. This is big business that's happening now. You imagine how many guns are being sold to the Ukrainians right now? From who? How many grenades? How many missiles? How many anti-missile defense systems? How many helicopters? How much money has Russia spent on defense that now they're able to manifest? But now, if we're saying we're going into a new era where now the individual has as much power as the state, now we could look back. Now we could look back on all the things that are happening and say to ourselves, hey, I'm an individual now. What I create and what I'm associated with can't destroy other people. I can't be a part of something that manufactures something I can make money on, but 100,000 birds die in another part of the world because of how it's created. But this is how we have to teach our fellow man. This is how we have to build. And the only tools that we have in the world is the Torah, is the laws of Hukim. How can we protect nature without now the individual is now the individual is in charge or has an influence. So what tools do we give that individual to remove their mind from the other system? That's the idea of individuality. This is the concept of this shit, radical, holy individuality. Because without that, we're gonna act in the same mindset as we did for the last 2 centuries. Please.
At the beginning of the pandemic, and when a number of people realized what was going on, and you have world leaders talking about the new world order, I asked myself the question, why are they okay with Islam, but they don't seem to be okay with Christianity and Judaism? And the answer that I came to is that Islam is a collectivist monotheism.
Yes.
The individual is completely subordinate to the cloud,
yes.
to the community, and they will destroy an individual that steps out alone.
You'll get killed.
Right. Whereas Christianity has absorbed this idea from Judaism that no, the individual is the image of God himself. And so that's why this radical collectivism needs to suppress these ideas.
Exactly.
It's okay with Islam. Islam's good, even though it's monotheism. They have an idea of morality. It doesn't matter. The issue now is collective versus the individual. And the Jews and the Christians understand Why is $1 important? $1 is not important in and of itself. It's important because there's 100 cents that make up the dollar.
Mm.
It's the individual unit that is the most important. And then a community has holiness or chashivas or importance because it's a collection of individuals, not because it's a community per se. So I think this ties into what you're saying.
No, that's perfect. It's perfect. And that's the point of this particular conversation, this particular share, whatever. It's not the classic share where we just go in the text, but it's really important to think about, like, what are we really trying to create right now? And what are we really up against? Because we're in such a special place that I think the Godolim from past generations would have been very scared of what we're up against, but they would have had a certain simcha because of the opportunity that we have. Because if done correctly, we could bring people tools that are connected to their ultimate fulfillment, but that tools for the ultimate fulfillment connects to the collective. And never before have we had that opportunity before. So one of the stories, it's a story that, I want to say, and we finished the share a little bit earlier today, so let's party it up to then. Just want to give Raquel enough time to do her thing, and we'll have some questions and answers. See, Rabbi Natan is bringing down some powerful steam right now, and so we're gonna have a little discussion. But I'm gonna finish my points, and then we'll open it up for just a little bit more discussion, because you understand we're in that position right now. Like, it seems like, oh, we're just talking about this stuff and we're sitting at this table and we're here learning every day, but we could literally go out and affect people like never before. And we could give people a way to see that, hey, Mishpatim, now that I'm a corporation, now that I'm a nation state, and now I'm a theocracy within myself, I can act in that way and bring a hashkafa for my neighbor that he didn't know about. And he could bring a hashkafa to me that I didn't know about. I'm the nation state. I'm the corporation. This is where we're at. I'm the spiritual idea. I am. I don't have to answer to anybody anymore. I used to always think, you look at Warner Brothers. I used to work for Warner Brothers years ago. And the thing that's interesting about Warner Brothers, you have Warner Music, you have Warner Films, Warner Publishing, Warner Advertisement. They have every different division, right? So when I was younger, I used to have this vision in my head. I said, you know what? When you look at, especially in the West, but this is all over the world now, every single house, when you think about the movies that are created, the music that's created, the television shows, Warner Television, the televisions that are created, the shows, the production studios, everything that you've done, and before I even make this point, people ask me all the time, I had a lot of success in the entertainment business. I really had a lot of success, but people ask me, so why didn't you stay? If you did these things, why did you leave? You know why I left? Because one day I was sitting in my office and I realized a thing, especially because I was doing a lot of things with young people off the internet and I was organizing them. I said, you know what? They don't need us anymore. This is over.
This model is dying.
It's dead, because that kid now could use this laptop and produce a single himself, release it through social media, and affect millions of people. And then we're in the companies, we're trying to catch up now. This is a new hot thing. Okay, let's grab it, let's get this thing. Before, we used to create the hot thing. We used to manufacture reality, because you didn't have any other choices of what was going on. You didn't know. So you saw a movie. Why did you like this movie? Because you're watching news reports that have these certain ideas, and these certain ideas in the news report are similar to this. And you know what? You heard some songs on the radio, and these certain types of love songs with these certain types of themes, remind you of this. And then there was TV shows on, and those TV shows were like the movies. I mean, we're like the songs, and we're like the images and the news and this whole thing. And so now there's a movie. And so what? This movie is like this song I was thinking about, but now it's a movie, and it's just like this story I read about the news. Oh, I gotta see this movie. That world's over now. It's done. Binyan Av is the king. Who's the Av? Who's the Binyan? That's what we got to figure out. Because this is the new reality. Because now I can make a movie with my laptop. You remember that movie Blair Witch Project?
Yes, I was thinking of that exactly.
Yeah.
You're talking about a structure where only the very, very top had access to the ability to produce this type of fantasy.
And distributed influence.
Right. And now, because of technology, I got my hi-fi 8mm.
Exactly. No, cell phone.
Yeah.
Blair Witch Project was shot with a cell phone.
And you know the interesting thing? Those types of artistic expressions we've seen are more compelling than what they used to create.
Exactly.
And they can't counterfeit that. Warner Brothers can't create a Blair Witch Project.
No.
They could try, but you'd see right through it. It would just be like,
it looks manufactured,
overproduced.
100%.
It's not authentic.
Exactly.
They can't. The individual has authenticity.
Exactly. So what we're seeing now is when you think about music, and that's what the thing is. Like when I was working in the entertainment space, I mean, it was like I was like so ahead of like so many people there, and all I did was like this. I said, you know what? Like I produced this TV show called Jerk All Stars, and so the basis of Jerk All Stars was, it's a long, I don't want to go into the story how it came about or whatever, but really the truth, the MS of it, one Saturday, because obviously it was before I was Jewish, I went to a dance competition thing on a Saturday. And it was all these kids, they were dancing and they were battling each other, and they were just having the best times of their life. And the parents loved it because their kids, they had somewhere to take their kids, and the kids were, it was like sports. Like the parents would take their kids to the baseball park or the football field or basketball court, and they were doing that. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Because at first I just wanted to do a documentary around these kids and what they were doing. But when I saw this, I was just like, this is it. This is the future. So this is the thing about the TV show. This show did close to 40 million views. You could Google it, Jerk All Stars. You can look it up, and they actually have a case study on the show because it just did so incredibly well.
It shocked the industry.
It shocked so how did we pull it off? So I was executive producer and co-creator of the show. And so how did it work out? All I did was this, very simple. I took the biggest dance crews online that had their own YouTube accounts, that had their own followings, doing millions of views, and I put them all on one platform to have a competition with each other. And they just aggregated their fans to one platform. That was it. That was it. That was it.
Just invite all the talent to a party and it's done.
Exactly. And I really, since that day, I haven't had a really serious job since then. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Like, so, and then I own like the publishing because Sprite was a sponsor. And so there were artists that had, I should probably say stuff. But the point is just saying, it was just that simple. And it was just aggregating that. But before I was able to do that, I went in the way even I got the job at Warner Brothers. This is all connected to spirituality. It was all this dance movement stuff, and all these kids were like doing all this viral stuff. And I saw it happen in this whole story. I was like working as a teacher, not a teacher, but my mom was a professor. And long story short, she was a professor. And my mom told me, because I was having success as an entrepreneur, as a business person, she said, you should really take your thinking and put it into a curriculum. And I was like, oh, wow. And so she taught me how to build curriculums. And then she set me up in a program where I could go and teach with teachers that were getting their masters. So I was a part of their, not dissertation, but their, it's another term, dissertations for PhDs. It was another term I can think of right now. But anyway, so I did that. And when I was on the campuses, thesis. So when I was on the campuses, I saw all this like kids dressing different, this, what I was like, wow, this is like the next big thing. And long story short, at the time, I was also learning how to be a community organizer, because that was a whole thing too as well. So basically what I did was I went out and organized all these kids that were popular, rappers and dance crews, and I sold them on this idea that I was going to do this movie. I wanted to be in this movie, and this is the name of the movie, Jerkin the movie. You can look it up, Jerkin, Jerkin. I'm gonna finish this point, and then we're going to go into questions.
Sorry.
I'm going to just finish this point, and then we're going to go right into your question. Okay. So I just remember, but the point is, so I went out and organized and basically created a theme around the organizations. And so when I met with Warner Brothers, I said, hey, look at all these people. They combined have over 100 million views. They're doing every couple months. And I said, if you, because every product that's created, they have this idea of the barrier of entry. So if I want to sell keepers, right? I got to manufacture, I got to whatever, but I got to figure out how much it's going to cost me to get people to actually wear it. And they call that cost the barrier of entry into the marketplace. So I showed him, I have this community, bless you, I have this communities already. And I told Todd Moskowitz, who's the CEO of Warner Brothers, I said, if you sign the artists in this group, in this community, your barrier of entry cost is almost null and void. So now you're only dealing with secondary and tertiary costs because you're already going to be able to quantify it because you already have a community.
Right.
That was it. And I became VP of New Media Development there, right? Exactly, that was it. And so the point is, why am I saying all these points? The point is just saying that when we think about the households today, and you think about the world, every home has the ability to produce their own content. The story of the family, the life of the family. Look at the Kardashians. Even a family has their own songs. The family could even create their own merchandise. The family, and they could produce that experience and share it anywhere in the world. And so when we talk about a new society,
no, I'm just thinking about like what you're talking about. It's like you were a master Kabbalist before you even knew what Kabbalah was. Why? Because what you did is you focused on the Kli. As long as I make the Kli good,
yes,
the success, the light, the shefa,
it will just come.
It's gonna come.
That's it.
Focus on this. I got the structure.
Exactly.
This is the boom, and then the whole thing just like that.
You know who taught me this? The guy at the center,
who
passed away. He showed me this way of thinking.
Because that's like applied Kabbalah.
Exactly.
You're like seeing it work.
It's reality.
Yes.
It's on the text. The text is there for you to see reality. And so what we're seeing now is that the work that we're doing is getting people to see that not only is their own unique expression who they are, viable for themselves and connecting to the rest of the world, but us as a collective society. And when we get people in this frame as a collective society of seeing their uniqueness and seeing how special they are and seeing technology as a vehicle to connect to other people and even turning into an economic form where I can exchange ideas to you. Like, for example, my mom, they brought my mom to China like years ago. You know why? Because China has this thing where they have only one kid. And so they had all these issues with the family, these families developing families that only had one kid. Sometimes the kids resented the parents. There's all this weird stuff going on. So they brought over educators from the West to give them ideas on how they could restructure the education system. So that's what my mom, she went over with other thinkers, whatever, and they did that. So when we think about a world that needs solutions, a world that is not participating in globalization, this freedom that we're talking about is a freedom that now can rectify a generation and create a collective akadus between all human beings, where I see that you have a value because of your life and what you experienced, and now I have a medium to receive it. And not only that, if I could receive your uniqueness, for sure there's a high chance that you need my uniqueness. But where does this come from? Avraham Avinu. This is what he brought into the world. This is what he was bringing. He was showing people how to find what makes them unique in the world, what makes them special in the world. This is what Avraham Avinu was doing. And yeah, okay, B'nai Israel, it's a religion, this, but no, the whole shorish of the 613 mitzvot, the whole shorish of the Hebrew calendar is to get people to actualize who they really are and to leave the collective ideology that says this is who you should be. This is the Judaism that we have to bring to the world and even to our own people. So with that being said, I'm going to open up to questions. I see Talmud Yishami out. I'm already scared. And we're going to see. But this is, I want to thank Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu and Patina Katisha for allowing me to share this perspective. But this is the world that we want to build, where everybody's a producer, everyone's a creator, everyone is a binyan of. and we're the Av, and we're also the Binyan at the same time. And that's how we get to know each other. Because if we don't push these ideas in the public, it's a chance that we could have the most selfish generation and the most selfish consciousness that's only going to lead to war and lead to destruction and even more famine. And I think this is the Gog and Magog, is this challenge between, are we see the beauty in each other, or do we only see our selfishness? And if we see, and just like in a marriage, right? Either I see the beauty in my partner's uniqueness. Hey. So anyways, so we're gonna open up to questions. What do we got?
Sorry, just said.
No, we're good. We're good. We got Yain if you want.
Thank you.
Oh, you can't reach your bag?
Yeah, we know.
All right, so go ahead. What do you-
Karl Marx.
Ah,
Oh,
whoa,
oh,
whoa.
okay.
He's gonna connect
Now we're ready.
this
Okay.
collectivism into this idea. Go ahead.
Speaks about
Go ahead, please.
יאללה, בשביל לעשות לחיים איתך, יאללה.
The what?
proletariat.
Ah, proletarian.
אתה רוצה הרי בשביל החיים?
No, do the bracha. Do bracha.
Yeah, yeah,
בטח,
yeah.
בטח, בטח, מה, אתה
לחיים,
חושב בשביל...
לחיים.
זה לא פורים עכשיו.
The scoot of Adar Simcha.
לחיים טובים ושלום.
Amen,
לחיים,
amen,
לחיים,
amen, amen.
לחיים.
Shama.
To greatness beyond our imagination. So, okay, so Karl Marx.
Karl Marx is this manifesto
Yes.
that
יפה.
has provoked much more the thought of many Africans,
תודה רבה.
kings and queens,
Mm.
the idea of liberation against the imperial, the capitalist system.
ערב טוב.
Yeah, talk to those investors.
It's about proletarian,
Yeah.
that the human beings were made as working slaves.
Yeah.
I'm taking from the Torah. My question is much more in the Torah. We have got the 7 kings.
Yep.
The first one is Bela.
Mm.
The word absorb, according to Talmud Yerushalmi,
Yeah.
is Balaa. The same letters, the same mikdot, the same as they appear in the Torah. Rabbi Mordechai mentioned about individualism,
Individuality.
individuality. Nations of the world have been absorbed. Some of them are absorbed. Some are about to be absorbed.
Yeah.
And the some will be absorbed.
Yeah.
And I'm listening so carefully to Rabbi Mordechai's exposition about the historical event, the evolution
Yeah.
of time.
Yeah.
Do you consider, do you see that America, in their foreign policy, with regard to other nations, is Bela or is Adar? That's my question.
I mean, you want me to make something up, or you want me to research it for a couple of weeks, to
I think what he's asking is America an assimilationist entity that's trying to swallow everything up into itself? Or is America the
Okay.
answer? Is America the answer, Or is America this ravenous appetite trying to consume and swallow everything? Because of this capitalist mentality that has no borders and it's really only about profit and everything else is subordinate to this.
So
I think
yeah.
that might be his question.
Yeah.
In other words.
So I think that question deserves a lot of reflection. I think it's a very valid question, and I think it's an important question. But I think one of the points that we've discussed is that regardless of America or any country, there is still a power base. If you look about the eras that we just went through, the era of religious theocracy controlling the world to a degree still exists to some degree today. The aspect of the power of the nation state still exists to a degree this day. And the concept of the corporation still exists to this day. But we're saying the era that we're in and going into further is the era of the individual. So I think the future world is not going to be a world based off of geographical governments anymore. I think these collective societies of people are going to form their own virtual governments, where people collectively decide how they want to live all around the world. So there may be, 50 million people in different parts of the world that say, this is what we believe, this is what the society we want to live in, and this is how we're going to trade our goods, this is how we're going to do it, and it's going to be beyond geographical borders that need militaries. Okay. Right? And so I think that's the future. I think the future is not America Dafka geographically, as it is, okay, as the ideas. You're gonna come back? Okay. As it's the ideas that America espouses and how relatable and how important it is to people who have their own independent sovereignty. If America's vision for a better world is really what it is, people are going to have a free choice and a free will to choose to assimilate into that government, into that idea. But it may not be geographically, it may just be ideology. It may not be the physical land. It may not be China. It may not be Russia. It may not be Ukraine. It may not be the Middle East. It may not be Iraq. It may not be Iran. It could be people collectively making their own societies. And I think Facebook is an idea of that.
So it sounds like that what you're saying is that right now we can understand these different loci of power in a geopolitical way as creating an idea.
Yeah.
That in a virtual world, anybody can connect to this idea. So the Russian idea is not Russia, the landmass. It's people wherever they are that connect to that vision of the world.
Exactly.
And so land is not the defining,
the premise,
determinant of geopolitical ideology anymore. It's diffused across.
It's a new reality.
Yeah.
And we have to imagine a new world. And in this new world, it's not even limited to, like we said, physical geographics. It's also space. Outer space. What role does it leave? If I live in outer space and my economic ideology is much different than it is on planet Earth. So this is the world that we're going into. It's not a world that's limited to geographical space anymore. It's a world that says, okay, I am connected to the world and I need to search out, like you have a search engine for any question that you have, I could search out the best idea that fits my needs as an individual. And so this concept of who we are and what we're about, we're past that. I mean, it's still here. And there's remnants, is a remiss to all these different things, nation state, theocracy, corporations, all these things exist today. But the new shorish that's being evolved is this idea that I can search engine the best philosophy that helps me physically, economically, and spiritually. And I think this is a world that was prophesized that the Jewish people in the laws of Mishpatim and the laws of Hukim and the laws of Mitzvot would be that reign supreme. and all the nations would say, you know what? That philosophy I connect with. That philosophy I want to be a part of, and they're going to find any Jew that's holding by this and cling to them and say, hey, I want to be a part of your nation, right?
I think Dr. Zachariah Sage
Mm,
would argue with you.
yes, I'm going to stop the recording just because I want Raquel to be able to,
Let's continue the discussion.
yeah, we'll continue the discussion.